afternoon. I'm pretty sure everybody's looking forward to the lunch after this. But nevertheless, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I take this opportunity to thank the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, the organizers of the 16th APPSMO, for giving me the opportunity to address this distinguished audience. I also like to thank the Dean of RSIS, Mr. Verdesker, for inviting me, and our chair, Professor Amos, for the introduction and the kind words. I had a chat with him prior to this, and I told the learned professor that he would be in a better position to speak on that subject. And we've come to sort of an agreement. I'll speak, and he will answer your questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we can see, the complexity and independent nature of the Asia-Pacific's geostrategic landscape raises numerous scenarios, especially those related to the security environment. The continuous shifts in the landscape have invited various responses with regards to the changing dimensions of strategy, as well as the changing nature of defense and security. In view of this, I shall provide a perspective relating to the present security challenges in the Asia-Pacific region, and the views given are from, of course, a Malaysian perspective, and the ASEAN perspective will be my primary focus. I must stress, though, that the views given are purely my own and do not reflect that of the Malaysian government. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, 50 years ago, Asia accounted for less than 15% of the global output. Today, it is more than 40%. And within the next few years, China is poised to be the world's largest economy, and by the end of the decade, Asia's output will probably exceed that of Europe and North America put together. This economic development has also been accompanied by waves of political reforms and challenges. Similarly, ASEAN, with its huge market of 620 million people and a combined GDP of USD 2.1 trillion, has influenced the economic and security perspectives of countries in the region, well, of course, including that of Malaysia's. Now, ASEAN as a whole has garnered world attention, especially now with the US giving priority towards the Asia-Pacific region with its pivot or rebalance towards Asia. Of course, other powers, such as Russia, France, and other countries of the European Union, have also shown interest in this region. As we can see, Southeast Asia remains a region of interest for many countries due to its strategic location and economic growth, and the Straits of Malacca retains a position that is critical to world trade and of economic importance. The South China Sea is another that hosts vital sea lines of communication connecting the Indian and Pacific Ocean and harboring potentially large energy reserves. With the current situation and tensions due to the overlapping territorial claims and a history of non-traditional security threats, non-state conflicts such as the problem in southern Philippines and southern Thailand are also areas of much concern. Ladies and gentlemen, now ever since the demise of the Cold War in the end of the last century, Southeast Asia has enjoyed not only relative peace, but unprecedented prosperity, mainly through political stability enjoyed in the region. That said, there are a number of issues which presents itself as traditional security challenges in the region. Though none of these issues have fled into full-fledged interstate confrontation, it retains a strong potential of escalating towards that direction unless managed effectively. Nagging issues such as the overlapping territorial claims in the South China Sea and other numerous border disputes may escalate into armed confrontation. This state of affairs, especially in the South China Sea, has been excavated with the involvement of global and regional powers with the intent to assert their respective interests. Another form of affliction faced in the region is the non-traditional security challenges, which affronts both the stability and human security enjoyed in Southeast Asia. These threats, which would include, amongst others, terrorism, insurgencies, piracy, human trafficking, material smuggling, and many others, as we can put them all together as other transnational crimes, are further aggravated by continuous natural or human-induced disasters commonly experienced in the region. Needless to say that the impact of these threats transcends national boundaries and may result in rapid destabilization of the region. Now, the Al-Qaeda-sponsored Jama'ah Islamiyah network of terrorist cells found in the region, separatist movements in the southern Philippines and southern Thailand constitutes part of the non-traditional security challenges faced. These threats are further compounded by the reports of piracy that pride on the busiest sea lines of communication, namely in the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea. Further to that, activities of human trafficking has not only demonstrated the porosity of the common borders, but the resulting mass influx of illegal immigrants that has seriously upset the demographic balance in some areas. As example, the huge presence of illegal immigrants in the state of Sabah does create a challenge as it causes some degree of instability. Not only that, the issue of human trafficking could sour interstate relations, as like between Australia and its neighbors recently, and a different dimension, yet a far more perilous issue, would be the affliction of natural disasters upon one's population. Now, the devastating impact of these disasters may not only inflict one particular area, but the region as a whole. As we can see, the tsunami in 2004 comes to mind, which left a trail of massive destruction and unimaginable death toll to a number of countries within days. Unless humanitarian aid and assistance are forthcoming, these calamities could trigger untold hardship, lawlessness, anarchy, and the collapse of government administration in its aftermath. In a nutshell, countries in the Southeast Asia region would not only have to manage the traditional security issues, but also handle the interstate non-traditional security challenges at the same time. Though non-traditional security threats may not warrant the employment of huge military forces to address it, but it demands a more comprehensive whole of government and multinational approaches to contain its impact. The geostrategic equation in Southeast Asia compels not only the protection of national boundaries against external threats, but the preservation of national sovereignty, which inevitably would be closely linked to the political and economic stability. Ladies and gentlemen, as one of the founding members of ASEAN, Malaysia's foreign policy has always emphasized on the notion that a strong and successful ASEAN is not only an economic necessity, but a strategic imperative. As Malaysia prepares for the chair of ASEAN next year and a possible inclusion into the UN Security Council, I'd like to mention that both political and security is one of ASEAN's community pillars which all members have pledged to support. This framework that ASEAN leads, such as the ASEAN Plus dialogue process, the ASEAN Regional Forum or ARF, which have now grown to 27 members, the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting or ADMM, and the ADMM Plus, and the East Asia Summit are notably important platforms to address security issues in the region. The importance of ASEAN can be seen as a platform for maintaining peace and stability amongst its members and as a forum for engagement with rising powers in the region, such as China, India, Japan, and Korea. As we know, since the formation of ASEAN in 1967, there have not been any open conflict among its member countries. And the ASEAN way of resolving problems and crises through consensus and mutual respect have indeed gone a long way towards avoiding unnecessary conflict and tensions. ASEAN also provides the necessary platform to provide and promote confidence building, cooperation, and diplomacy. For example, discussions between ASEAN and China on the Code of Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea is progressing, though slow. Hopefully the COC will be a key instrument in ensuring the proper management of the sea, as mentioned earlier. Here, I must highlight that there are positive precedents for handling such situations, as we can see what is happening in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. As an example, the dispute between Malaysia and Indonesia over the islands of Sipadan and Ligitan was settled amicably in the International Courts of Justice. Similarly, disagreements between Malaysia and Singapore over Pedra Branca took a similar path, showing that diplomacy and adherence to international accepted rules of law can and must prevail. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of diplomacy and constructive dialogues, I'm encouraged to note that even countries with differences, such as in the case of China and Taiwan, have also begun talks to minimize the potential of conflict. The first ever government-to-government talks in 65 years between the two countries was held early this year, and it not only augurs well for the region, but can be construed as a symbolic gesture for others with a similar predicament to emulate. Such initiatives not only contribute to the stability of the region, but the more pressing issue of addressing emerging non-traditional threats that affects us all in some way or other. Our region is also vulnerable to environmental threats which may emerge from natural disasters or even man-made ones. Over the past decade, we have seen many humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations conducted to assist the affected nation. It is acknowledged that the first 72 hours of any relief efforts is most vital in saving lives of any potential survivors in a disaster. Recently, the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, or ADMM, in April this year, it was proposed that the ASEAN Humanitarian Aid and Disaster Relief Coordinating Center be established in Singapore to coordinate relief efforts in the region. I am pleased to mention that during the Putrajaya Forum in Kuala Lumpur, organized by Midas in April this year, Singapore Defense Minister, Mr. Ng Eng Hen, reiterated the importance of this center in coordinating future relief efforts to any nation in distress. I believe that the location of this center in Singapore is a logical choice, and that it will certainly expedite and better coordinate future relief efforts. I must also stress that for this center to become more effective in the future, it will require support and cooperation from other nations within the Asia-Pacific region. And this center would also be a platform for multilateral cooperation and diplomacy among nations in this region. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been widely accepted that the ills in the international system could be contained through the effective employment of diplomacy. Within the massive labyrinth of diplomacy lies the word defense diplomacy, which is closer to our hearts. Despite lacking a clearly accepted definition of defense diplomacy, it is universally recognized as the peaceful application of resources across the spectrum of defense to achieve positive outcomes in the development of a country's bilateral and multilateral relationship. In this sense, it does not include military operations, but subsumes other defense-related activities such as exchanges of personnel, exercises, visits, high-level engagements, regional defense forums such as the Putrajaya Forum and the Shangri-La Dialogue, outreach for confidence building and better understanding among nations. While much of the efforts to mitigate conflict in the region is conducted through the various regional mechanisms and meetings, the process could be further elaborated through effective defense diplomacy. Endeavors towards conflict aversion would be hollow without taking cognizance on the importance of strong military relationship developed through years of goodwill. As a well-known Chinese scholar once said, if the people responsible for national security feel comfortable with each other, the government should find good reason to get along with each other. This simplistic viewpoint carries much weight, especially in ASEAN, where the close and personal relationship between principal personalities in the respective higher defense organizations have managed to iron out major differences which could have led to conflict. As a case of point, I would like to mention the incursion of the Royal Sultanate of Sulu Security Forces into Lahad Datu early last year. And in this case, the Malaysian Chief of Defense Force was constantly in communication with his then Philippines counterpart, coordinating joint measures to address the threat. He was also in communication with the Defense Force chiefs of ASEAN states, updating them on the progress of the operations and related issues. As such, it is imperative to recognize the importance of defense diplomacy in our endeavor to build confidence and develop collective measures against common challenges. There is no doubt that with the economic growth and development of military capabilities, the security challenges affecting the Asia-Pacific region are not new, although the emerging ones coming from non-traditional sources are taking different forms. We must acknowledge that it is not always easy to identify these potential threats at the development stage because they emerge so gradually and incrementally. The causes and trends of these threats demand continued engagement and cooperation with nations within and beyond ASEAN, including those who have the capabilities to address multidimensional security threats, which remains a part of our regional security. I believe that positive engagements, diplomacy, and working together to strengthen ASEAN to develop deeper connections between our region and the world. With that, we can be better prepared for the security challenges we face in the years to come. In the midst of a period of sustained economic and geopolitical interests, we can ensure Asia's rise is both peaceful and prosperous. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I wish to congratulate RSIS for organizing the 16th edition of the Asia-Pacific Program for Senior Military Officers. I have no doubt that this program provides a good platform for networking and understanding of the security environment of the region, and with much indulgence, we can all work towards a more stable and peaceful region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Stevenson. Before I